Так, шановні гості, всіх
Dear guests, greetings everyone. Valeria Skvortsova, Executive Director, Ukrainian Independent Center for Political Studies. I'm glad to greet you today in presentation index of sustainability for civil society organizations for 2024. Today we present the report and also interactive dashboard that we've developed, and also we will have the discussion about how the condition of civil society changed in 2024 and what are the lessons learned. Before we start our event, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alexey Orlovsky, Director of the Democracy and Good Governance Program, International Renaissance Foundation, and actually this event is done today with his support. So Mr. Alexey, the floor is yours. Hello, dear friends. I do understand that in modern conditions, it is really specific to talk about the development of civil society organizations, because of what we had actually as of 1st of January this year and what we have as of today significantly different on many points. So I hope that during today's event, we will come back all the time to more modern and more relevant events of 2025. However, still, I would like to remind you that this report is about the 2024, the year 2024. So let us try to just work in this framework. Why is that important? Because for civil society, it is very important to assess how the condition of development of civil society is changing, to conduct this self-assessment to a significant extent, to see how civil society can impact the authorities, how authorities are treating civil society, how sustainable is civil society in certain issues and aspects, etc. For me personally, 2024 was quite neutral, I would call it, from the point of view of what was happening in the context and inside of civil society. Why? Because indeed we were observing certain positive tendencies that are related to normative issues regarding the civil society, the so-called kind of legal environment. In the report that we will present, we can pay attention to the legislation that is regulating public consultations. We can recall the so-called law on kind of civil power, etc. But even those positive moments that emerged during this period in 2024, still they cause a lot of questions from civil society, especially regarding the subjects that the legislation public consultations is applied to, and maybe that makes the issue more relevant, the issue of reviewing the legislation. We have to mention that the law on public powers was signed during 8 months after its adoption. It's also a very interesting moment that maybe can show us that it's not always that these issues are in the priority among other issues considered on the level of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine and so on and so forth. So to a great extent, well, not taking into account the fact that we are talking about certain positive tendencies on the level of legislation, nevertheless, still, there are some other issues. The same situation. Probably we all see a situation with the financing from the side of civil society. Yeah, like USAID, etc., etc. Well, it's more 2025, but certain tendencies were observed back in 2024, aiming at complicating access to financing from the side of civil society organizations. Yeah, civil society organizations continue having, and even today they prove this, they are having significant impact, and they know how to promote the interests of civil society in an efficient way. But again, here we still have something to work on, and I am totally sure that this is the task that will arise in front of civil society in the following years as well. At the end, I would just like to mention that for our foundation, for International Renaissance Foundation, which for 35 years has been supporting development of civil society, it's actually our mission factor in our activity, I would say. We will continue working in this direction, and this aspect will be the key aspect for us during the whole period of existence of our foundation. So with pleasure, I would like to listen to the materials that were developed by my colleagues, and I hope for a really fruitful and productive discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexei. And I would like to thank you one more time, because it's the second time that you are supporting this project, and I think it's very important to measure this temperature, so to say, how the environment is changing. And thank you very much for support of civil society of Ukraine in general. It's very valuable for us. We appreciate that. And next, I would like to give the floor to our colleague from Brussels, Ms. Maria Sola de la Donne. And she works in European Commission, and in particular, she is working on Ukrainian enlargement report, and she has determined the significant role of civil society in this important document.
And good morning to everyone. I'm Maria Sola Delle Donne from the European Commission. Thanks again for the invitation to speak today. It's a pleasure to join this important discussion on the state and sustainability of the civil society in Ukraine. Even during wartime, and in some ways because of it, Ukraine civil societies have demonstrated extraordinary resilience and adaptability, and many organizations have even shifted their operation to provide essential services, support citizens, and bridge the gaps between the government and the communities. And just as importantly, they continue to play a critical watchdog role in both reform monitoring and reconstruction reforms, helping ensure transparency, accountability, and citizens' trust. And the event of last week, for example, have really proved it. So in the context of the enlargement process, the civil society plays a crucial role. So at the European Commission, the civil society actors are not only stakeholders, but they are key partners in our work. Their contribution to the policy making, reform monitoring, and project implementation help ensure that EU-supported efforts are rooted in local realities. And we try to maintain active engagement with civil society organizations at both headquarters and EU delegation levels, making sure that CSOs' voices are heard across all the stages of our work, from planning to monitoring and evaluation. So CSOs are essential because they promote democratic values and protect human rights, push for transparency and accountability, fight against corruption, monitor EU funds, again, monitor, watchdog, and advocate for public policy reforms and EU accession priorities, facilitate the public dialogue with the local citizens, so again, bridging the gaps between government. We are in the process of drafting the annual enlargement report. That is not just a technical document, but it reflects the political and societal transformation of the country. So civil society contributions, whether through the evidence-based advocacy, shadow reports, or public consultation, are crucial in making the report comprehensive and grounded in reality. And therefore, the Commission welcomes the structure, the timely input from CSOs as part of our assessment process. Of course, civil society organizations can only effectively carry out these activities within an enabling environment. So one that provides a clear legal framework as well as financial and operational support. This is also something that the EU pays careful attention to in the framework of the accession process, as the role of the civil society is part of the elements that are assessed in the fundamental clusters, as you know very well. And in this assessment, we analyze the overall enabling environment, the level of engagement between civil society and public authorities, and the tools that are in place to facilitate it. We also monitor closely the civil society access to funding, as well as any reported instances of pressure or intimidation against human rights defenders and civil society activists. Just to add on the financial support, the civil society in Ukraine has been financed under Pillar 3 of the Ukraine facility, namely under the Technical Cooperation Facility. And the civil society, the EU's civil society portfolio in Ukraine for 2024 consisted of 90 ongoing grant projects with a total of EU contribution of more than 148 million euro, aimed at supporting governance, human rights, environmental protection, and war recovery efforts. And the delegation will soon launch a civil society call that I really encourage you to have a look at once it is out, and you can check it on the website. For the future, the EU stands ready to fill in the gaps that were recently left as much as we can. And with that, I thank you again for the opportunity to meet you today, and I look forward to hearing the results of 2024 and to continuing our joint efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'm sure that Civil Society of Ukraine will remain a good partner for European Commission and Europe in general. Thank you. Добре, колеги.
Okay, colleagues, so now we will come to presentation of the results of the study. I will ask to show our presentation on the screen. Thank you very much. So briefly about the index itself, the Index of Sustainability. Yeah, it is a former international study which assesses sustainability of organizations, and namely organizational capacity, financial viability, advocacy, provision of services, sectoral infrastructure, public image. So this methodology and these indexes were developed by USAID projects, and now the second year in a row our organization continues this project. Unfortunately, this global initiative came to an end in 2023, but we continue measuring these indexes. As you can see, the index in Ukraine in 2024 is 3.0, actually the same index as last year. However, we had a range of sectoral improvements, and if you can see on this schedule, most indexes now are of higher importance. If we look at all these indexes historically, then we can see certain progress that of course makes us happy. But we still have a weak point in terms of financial viability. Unfortunately, that is the weakest point. However, even that in 2024 had certain improvements. We will start with legal environment. So that is one of the indexes that has improved in 2024. It is 3.3. So it is worth mentioning, just like Alexei said, there was a range of good draft laws that regulate public participation, in particular the law on public consultations, and also the public governance on the level of local self-governance, and the law on ensuring transparency in local self-governance. It is worth mentioning that, for example, the law on public consultations comes into force a year after the end of martial law. It's a problem. But if we consider the local level, then actually on the level of hromadas or communities, these norms can be already implemented. And in particular, the new charters can be adopted and the mechanisms of public consultations can be developed. Then there were also some positive changes in laws that are regulating humanitarian aid. Mostly that was about the registration of vehicles as humanitarian aid, which has simplified life for many charitable organizations. There were certain changes in the field of regulation of volunteer activity, in particular the law on promotion and development of volunteership among students. I can't omit by attention certain challenges that happened. If we look at the legal environment index, that is mostly the bank services for CSOs. This problem emerged earlier, it continues in 2024, and the organizations that are registered on frontline territories are facing this challenge mostly because there were some delays of money from abroad, and there were cases when organizations had to re-register themselves on the territories that are better controlled by Ukraine. If we are talking about attacks to activists and representatives of civil society, there was tendencies that the biggest harm was caused by Russian Federation by their aggressive actions on the territory of Ukraine, but there were also certain moments like pressure on Bigus Info and investigations. These are negative tendencies. Unfortunately, in 2025, they are also seen, and we see that anti-corruption is fought for during the meetings. Then also organizations continued having the opportunity free of charge consultations regarding legal issues, and now this opportunity is still there for them. If we talk about organizational capacity, this index, as you can see, is improving in the last years, and we have documented together with Isar Yednanya that organizations are assessing their own level of adjustability. They are developing their organizational capacities, even though we cannot stop and mention that many organizations still don't understand what is happening after 2022. There are many organizations. What do they need this development? But there are also those that are actively developing. Fortunately, there's possibility to get the grants. There were many possibilities, and then, according to the feedbacks from organizations that received grants, we can mention high level of satisfaction from services received, and organization noticed good impact on their own development. Well, of course, a challenge is still the issue of staff, because unfortunately there is immigration of many Ukrainians, burnout in the teams, mobilization, even though in 2024 there is possibility of kind of like booking people. But it's a very complicated procedure. Not everybody had the opportunity to use that. However, I think that even as of today, this issue remains quite problematic. And I think that we will observe this tendency further on, unfortunately. Then also organizations were paying certain attention to their strategic development and working on their strategies. However, as we've noticed, these strategies have shortened in time. So earlier it was development for like 5 years prognosis, and now organizations like are taking into account the conditions in which they are existing as of now. These are conditions of war. Next, financial resilience. We see certain improvement, not that big, but the tendencies of that organizations mostly were receiving support from donors, international donors, in terms of grants. Well, this remains, and there was big support from traditional donors like the USA, European Union, big donor organizations on the local level, like Isariadnanya and International Renaissance Foundation, so they could receive support for development of their projects. Then out of the initiatives, state competition for NGOs and CSOs was returned, especially on the local level. This practice shows it's a very important source that they are using to promote their own projects. If we talk about cooperation with the business, unfortunately, it hasn't become a trend. It was developed, but it's more like separate cases. Organizations need more understanding of how to work with businesses. They need more knowledge about how to sell themselves, so to say, and how to sell their social projects. So it's a field for growth still for this sector. Then, in this sense, we can also mention the level of financial management. Well, here the level remains the same as last year, depending on the size of organization, their internal capacity to involve additional specialists. However, step by step, this direction is being developed, and the professionals in the financial field, we have more and more of those, and they are more and more actively engaged in the activity of CSOs. Advocacy. We also can see that after quite a long period of 2.2 index, we have improvement in 2024. Well, of course, in this context, I should mention that in 2024, for the first time, the broad public meeting of representatives of civil society and the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, happened. That shows certain warming up in the relationship, and finally the perception that civil sector can be useful, that it should be engaged more actively. In particular, confirming this understanding at the office of the president, there are certain working groups that were engaging representatives of CSOs, for example, in terms of volunteers and humanitarian aid. As far as I know, their work continues, and it's a good platform for different organizations, including volunteer organizations, so that they can promote useful legislation and changes. I cannot stop mentioning international advocacy for CSOs. It was very active in 2024, and the representatives of civil organizations were participating in different international events, such platforms as URC, forums, even some safety events. That has become the trend already, even though earlier CSOs were naturally perceived as players that can say something about safety. However, as of today, we can see that the front line is supported by such organizations, and organizations are procuring weapons directly. They are also advocating this. So it's a full cycle, I dare say. Certain positive moments were also here in the field of European integration. As of now, we have 36 working groups that are forming negotiation framework with the EU, and each group includes representatives of CSOs. In addition, we have worked on some working roadmaps in terms of European reforms in Ukraine, the roadmaps, I'm sorry. So, with the help of engagement of expertise from civil society. In this part, it is also very important to mention the challenge, the lawn lobbyism. Fortunately, by our joint efforts, we could weaken all the threatening norms that are there. However, now this process continues, and we have to watch carefully not to come back to the moment that there will be some norms that are restricting for civil society. Service provision. Again, it remains the same, 2.9, and traditionally here CSOs were focused on provision of social services. In this context, I'd like to mention very good cooperation of civil society with Ministry of Social Policy on building the resilience centers. This is a very good support tool on the level of communities. I think Ms. Halina Skipalska will tell us a bit about that today. Very good and successful cooperation, in my opinion. In 2024, it was 185 centers created according to this initiative, or in the framework of this initiative. Then also organization where both the state and donor environment were procuring services from them, and traditionally, as of now, they like cooperation with donors more because less bureaucracy, it is more convenient, the mechanism itself is more convenient. However, there was also certain cooperation with the state as well. Then infrastructure or field infrastructure. 2024, if we are talking about the main things in this direction, it was noticed by strong networking among CSOs. I mean, these connections were strengthened, and there were a lot of coalitions and local initiatives, and it should be mentioned that mostly these coalitions and initiatives were created, for example, to gain new experience by organizations to strengthen their visibility, etc. But very often it was also for joint advocacy, and I think that there is certain space for strengthening the possibilities of these coalitions. Then again, it should be mentioned in this context that there was trend for localization of resources, and particularly these are resources about humanitarian aid. However, according to the research that we use to prepare our report, less than 1% of money that are coming is used for local organizations. So we still have some space for development. We have to increase trust and grow capacity of local players to administer big amounts of money. Then also Isar during their forum, they just united us all together, and that is a big event, and we always mention this. More than 4,000 participants who were there on the forum of civil society, and that was a real networking of almost all the spheres: state, society, military, business. That's a very good platform to look for and create some new initiatives, joint initiatives. And last but not least, in terms of importance, public image. Here we see certain improvement as well. And the trust is growing step by step to some initiatives, etc. Donations continue, support continues. However, we should mention here that there was a trend for bigger support of individual volunteers and individual donations than organizations. Probably it's related with trust, I guess. It's easier for people to understand where the money goes if they give it to the volunteer they know than when they give it to some foundation. But it's an issue for discussion, and we need to consider how do we develop this trust further on. In this context, it was already mentioned, well, there were good productive relationship with authorities like central and regional level. Even though when we are talking about local level, of course, military administrations, they unfortunately remain really closed. However, if we look at that in general, for example, how open the authorities are, their openness is growing. That's it from my side. Next, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Irina Yakovenko. In the framework of this project, we were also working on interactive dashboard, and you can see these indexes in the last 10 years, and about navigation, Irina will tell you. Thank you very much. Hello, dear colleagues. I'm so glad to greet you, and I'm glad to present information product today that the team of experts of Ukrainian Independent Center for Political Research was working on. It is the dashboard of Civil Society Organization Sustainability Index for Ukraine. It was implemented with the support of International Renaissance Foundation. I will ask you to show that. This is how it looks like. So you can go there and you can see the interactive dashboard of the Sustainability Index of CSOs. That is interactive tool. Why did we create this dashboard? To visualize all the data that allows to see the dynamics of development of organizations of civil society in Ukraine in the last 10 years. That is, as a matter of fact, we took 2013 till 2023. However, as soon as the work on the research was finalized, the research that we are presenting today, we added the data as well. And I'd like to show you that here we have the pop-up window, and we can, here on the main page of the dashboard, we can see, can we see the graph? Yeah, so we can see the details, how that was changed. We can click on that. It's all very interactive. We also have some buttons. Right, so here we can go with these buttons and we can take the index which is interesting for us. For example, let us try the legal environment. Yeah, we will go there, and here we can read in more detail about the data that are interesting for us. So we can see the graph, we can see how that was changing over time. We see also the legend of the map, like brief explanation. Why, for example, this, we can see 2.2, right? So that is brief explanation. So it's, just brief teaser, for you to be interested in that, to find the research, to read the research that is interesting for you, and hopefully you will do that. So our main goal was to make the results more convenient and accessible, and also to provide the interested parties, first of all, representatives of CSOs and state authorities, researchers, convenient tool to see the dynamics of development of CSOs in Ukraine, and also to see certain trends and help make decisions in the field of organization. As I've mentioned, each of the indexes, and we have 7 of those, are presented on a separate page. Everything is very convenient navigation, and indeed we can see that what has become the reason for improvement, or maybe something changed for the worse, or maybe nothing has changed. So I also have to mention that the information which is contained in our interactive dashboard was collected from the research of Ukrainian Independent, from UCIPR. These are data till 2024, and for analysis we've used the data of CSO Sustainability Index, that is since 2014 till 2017. So we were researching those researches as well, and we were having them as a basis for our index. I'm asking you to go to archive part. Yeah, here the person who will go there for the first time, they will see the index, they can just read what is that and just learn about the index, learn about the dashboard. And here you also can, if you scroll down, you can review the archive, you can download that, you can research that. And in case if you have any questions, or maybe you would like to learn more in part of contacts, you can send us your questions, your offers, and we will give you the answer. For sure, I would like to mention also that an interactive dashboard it's not only available in Ukrainian, there is also English version of that, because we want that after the presentation you already can download, review, and it's not only for Ukrainian speaking audience but also for our international donors and experts. Hopefully they are watching us as well and they see what we are showing. I'd like to mention also that the dashboard was we've been working on that for like 5 months, and I would like to thank the International Relations Foundation one more time for their support. In addition to preparation in our social network, Facebook and LinkedIn, we were informing about how the indexes of sustainability were changing in these 10 years. If you are interested, you can, like, even now or after the presentation, go to the LinkedIn or Facebook. Yeah, you can go there, you can read the brief information about how all of that was changing, which year was the kind of coolest for us in terms of sustainability of CSOs. So I thank you very much, and I wish us all fruitful discussion. Thank you very much, Irina. That is the person who was working on development of this website. Thank you one more time for all your nerves and efforts. Next, I'd like to invite our today's speakers for a discussion. Hello, colleagues. Please, my name is Yulia Hanur. I am the head of UCIPR, and I would like to invite our speakers. So today we have Maxim Latsipa, head of the Civil Society Development Program, Ukrainian Center for Independent Political Research, Olga Limar, executive director of RPR Coalition, Ms. Halina Skipalska, country director in Ukraine Health Right International, Alexander Ravchev, consultant on communications and advocacy, and Natalia Klimova, ISAR Jednania. So, we already see Mr. Maxim Latsiva. Hello, Maxim. Please. What are the main challenges in general that you could feel in 2024 for CSOs? Or maybe what we can comment based on index. Yeah, hello dear colleagues. You know, after this, as of now, unfortunately successful attempt of liquidation of NABU and SAP, mentioning some benefits and disadvantages of 2024, we can't do that because we see that in half of the day, unfortunately, the parliament of the president can just turn over the 10 years of successful history of creation of anti-corruption bodies and their work. So actually, it means that, yeah, there is never the point of no return. It doesn't exist, I should say it this way. Because at any moment, these positive successes and development of democracy, etc., all of that might be quickly destroyed and changed. We remember the story, 16th of January, when the parliament of the Party of Regions, they voted for the law that was limiting the civil rights and freedoms, and now we see the repetition of that. So we have to work really actively on that. We have to watch what is happening in the legal field of Ukraine. But coming back to the legal environment in 2024, so you could see that 0.1 was the improvement of index, and that is really good. However, what was in there? I would say it this way, that in 2024 we had several big wins in the legal sense and several, let us say so, and also a lot of good processes were founded that we already have. We have good successes 2025. So I will mention also the first half of 2025. So as for the system of registration, to a great extent in 2024, the registration of organizations hasn't changed. Fortunately, it didn't become worse, even though when there was attack to registers, then for several weeks they were not functioning properly, the registry for all the legal persons. And we have to mention that we lost the online House of Justice, the Ministry of Justice service, where you could submit documents online for registration, but the registration was still happening manually afterwards. So it's been working so-so, but it existed. Unfortunately, it did not recover. But we have some positive news in 2025. I will come back to that. As for the positive things, that is for foreign NGOs, the legislation was simplified on creation, registration here of separate units for foreign NGOs in Ukraine. That becomes more clear and easy. So we have some positive here. Yeah, welcome. And I think that we have to support, maybe help big international organizations to come here to be our partners and to use these opportunities. What is our victory for sure? And it was mentioned today by the speakers already, that is adoption of the law on civil powers. It is acting. Well, it was adopted in 2024. Then in several months, the president signed that. So you see, President Zelensky can sign that in 1-2 hours. I mean, the document, the law, if that is limiting democratic rights and freedoms. But if it's vice versa, well, the citizens of Ukraine gain some new possibilities to impact the state, then it can last, like the violation of constitution, for 8 months. And still, the law on transparency of activity of the committees of Verkhovna Rada 11321 is still not signed. 5 months, this violation of constitution is lasting from President Zelensky. So we have some tasks to work on, and we have something to measure in the field of advocacy. So that gives the new opportunities for sure for citizens, for IDPs, youth, and NGOs. They can actively participate in the process of decision-making on local level. They can participate in the reconstruction processes of territorial communities. The law on public consultations, it comes into force for the executive bodies a year after the martial law, but it has come to force for local communities. So there are some provisions on public consultations, and they are conducted. However, unfortunately, they are trying not to notice that, just like the Ministry of Regional Development. So no one has reminded people that it's already in force. But the law is very important, and we have to help it be implemented. I'd like to say that there were some doubtful achievements. I talk about the law on lobbying in Ukraine. Well, the story has started at the end of 2023, but mainly it was developed at the beginning of 2024. There was governmental very bad draft law, I would say, that kind of equaled the public activity with lobbyism, and actually the types of activity conducted by NGOs was falling under this law, and they had to register in the registry of lobbyists and make the detailed financial reports, etc., etc. And there were significant limitations into the activity of CSOs. But thanks God, different CSOs were actively engaged, and so all the organizations, they succeeded. They could improve the text of the draft law significantly. Now it's a draft law on lobbying. It comes into force from September this year. And I would say like 85% of the public activity is not falling under this law, but 15% still in the risk zone, I would say. So is that disseminated to CSOs and NGOs? Yes. Is there the risk that the main controlling body can go to court and say that the NGOs are illegal with fines, etc., etc.? Yes, there is such risk. And we will see how that will work since September 2025. So we have to get ready, we have to prepare the infrastructure and protection of organizations, like civil society organization. I'm confident that the Center for Prevention of Corruption will be number one. They would like to cause pressure on that, like the authorities would like to cause pressure and not to allow to develop the anti-corruption activity that is actively conducted. It is also worth mentioning that there was, well, thanks God, the competition for projects for CSOs. There was cool competition of projects for Ministry of Veterans and the Fund of Veteran Protection. They conducted that for NGOs together with Isari Yednanya, where that was supported by Ukrainian government, and administrative expenses were supported by Isari Yednanya. That's actually very good. However, that shows that still there is priority for improvement of procedures of financing of NGOs, because why the government of the Netherlands can support administrative expenses and Danish government or German government can support these administrative expenses of their and Ukrainian organizations, and it's nonsense actually. And here we have some space for growth and development. What happened in 2024? It's actually that from the beginning of 2025, the law in support of volunteering in educational institutions has come into force, and there are certain norms that make the heads of certain education institutions to promote the volunteership in their institutions, and let us say so to help the volunteers. Well, not even, no, I didn't say that right. So the volunteers who are verified, those who have hours of working as a volunteer, it's a benefit for those who are applying into higher educational institutions. That's for 2025. The process has started back in 2024, but we have really cool results. So in March, the government has adopted the plan of action for development of CSOs and strategies of development of CSOs, and actually approximately 95 important events are there on development and better legislation and interaction of local self-government and bodies of national level. So the plan is cool and ambitious. However, it seems to me that civil society and donors' environment still haven't found their role in its implementation. So it seems to me that most donors expect that the ministry and regional administrations will report somewhere that, yeah, the measures were implemented and everything is good. No, this plan is a nice declaration, but it won't be performed without that. So we want to have some benefits in the next index. We have to start, and donors should be able to check how many events did they support from this wonderful plan on development of civil society in the framework of their programs. It is worth mentioning also that a very cool decision, the government has adopted the roadmap on Euro integration and the development of democratic institutions and the rule of law, and there are very important tasks for Verkhovna Rada and the Cabinet of Ministers in terms of improvement of legislation for civil organization. We need to be engaged here as well, because these things will be performed, because our financial assistance is related to that, etc., etc. It's very good that we have as our roadmap and that starts functioning. So, for example, the updates of different laws, we have the working group in the parliament, and we have some work being done in this regard. But before that, somehow everybody refused to work on this draft law. So, out of the positive moments, this year the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers adopted the model for the activity of CSO. It's like something additional, but again, based on that, you can register NGO online via a DIA application. Well, the resolution 21st of November, again, advocacy organization, advocacy campaign. And hopefully that will start functioning. And the cool decision is that this year, for social services and services provided by charitable foundations, there was really cool decision. Verkhovna Rada has cancelled the tax, added value tax, social services provided by NGOs. And yeah, different organizations, CSOs, NGOs, etc. And now the taxation system for state and non-state service providers is determined, and that gives the opportunity for development of sector like services for social services. In Germany, approximately 60% of social services are provided by non-governmental organizations and to the demand of national budget and local budget. So I think it's big prospects for Ukraine. And also the state program for the development of volunteers in Ukraine was developed, and Shmyhal's government has performed their promises and they did it. So now they need to adopt the program itself. Hopefully they will do it this year. And there was a lot of things done on the level of resolutions of the cabinet of ministers in terms of improvement of humanitarian aid. So that is, there was the opportunity to register the vehicles that were brought by different CSOs, and they are giving that to military servants so that the military servant can register that military transport on themselves and it is not on the balance of CSO. And also the 112 resolution provision of humanitarian aid. I mean, when NGOs are providing humanitarian aid, there was limitation that only in the format of money, right? And so what was added? That also in material form, that is, even if you give that some goods, then VAT will not be still there for beneficiaries if charitable foundation is in the role of tax agent. So it's a simplified procedure for use of humanitarian aid because it used to be very complicated procedure. And very good development of the process is 12010 draft law that is provision of the right to NGOs and different religious organizations to bring vehicles for themselves to conduct humanitarian reaction. So they use the vehicles like the buses on the balance of NGO. They will develop their financial and organizational capacity, and they will be able to perform their mission and provide services for their target audiences. So we hope that this year it will be implemented. And also in the first reading there was a law on simplification of requirements to foreign volunteers who want to work in Ukraine as long-term volunteers. So, well, good positions that were founded, the processes in 2024, they won in 2025. So I hope that what I mentioned, like the processes that started as of now in 2026, we will be able to say that, yeah, they are finalized successfully. So Anatoly Fedorovich Tkachuk has wrote that do your best so that every day you finalize one important process, and at the end of the year you will have 365 success stories. So I would like to wish all of us, well, I don't know whether every day, but at least every month, to have some important decision for development of good environment and civil society. And at the end of the year, we will have at least 12 powerful decisions. And if more, the more the better. Thank you very much, Maxim. Especially nice it was to mention that the biggest part of all the initiatives that you mentioned was joined by the colleagues from Ukrainian, from CIPR. Okay, I give the floor to Natalia Klimova. Natalia, your organization was conducting support for CSOs, both regional and all over Ukraine. Tell us, please, in 2024, how the approaches to support has changed and what are the trends? Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Well, finally, there is growth that is documented by the index. I am so happy to that personally because we've seen on dashboard, thank you very much to the team of UCIPR. Well, you show that there was lack of progress, and I was so sad because of that, because in my opinion, it did not show the real situation, especially after the full-scale invasion, when CSOs actually became those that are keeping the country, when the armed forces of Ukraine are keeping the front line we were doing everything possible, providing humanitarian aid and supporting IDPs and taking people from occupation from the front line, etc., etc., and continued conducting reforms at the same time and providing intellectual and other types of support to our authorities and local and central level. We all saw that, and personally for me, that is like the continuation of assessment on the same level. I felt that it's unfair. So as of today, I am monitoring and I am so happy. It's a big happiness for me that it's, well, I won't say that it's big kind of heroism. It's not, it's more about the armed forces, but it is close to it. Something that is done by our CSOs. It's good that experts show that. It's good that the index is showing that finally, because it is showing the real situation and the real capacity that is shown by charitable foundations in Ukraine nowadays. Yeah, so we have to continue working. We have to be the hands, heart, head, and everything that is supporting Ukraine nowadays. Answering the question about the trends, well, I think I should mention that huge number of volunteer initiatives and volunteer organizations, as it is called. I think that Srkoravchev will maybe comment this phenomenon, the so-called volunteer organizations that have appeared in mass consciousness. This is a fresh blood and fresh people in sector. Well, of course, it is reflected that they brought a lot of fresh ideas and, well, maybe it's a paradox, but business approaches to management of the organizations. We can see that because now it's easier to explain people why do you need a professional manager? Why do you need a professional, I don't know, SMM manager? Why do you need a professional accountant, etc., etc.? Because before the full-scale invasion, before this big wave of newcomers in this sector, very often there was such opinion that, oh, we are so good, we are united for a good idea, that's enough, we are going to do something good. Now there is no need to explain that business processes have to be settled well in the organization. It doesn't matter whether they are profitable or not profitable organization. The organization should have all the necessary elements so that the organization functions as a unified system, even if somebody goes on vacation or somebody is sick, etc., etc. So now we have more understanding in this sector. Then, what else do we see? Big number of new providers, new infrastructure solutions that are there in the field of organizational development, and that makes us happy as well because it means that there is need, there are requests, and the market is answering the request and the need, offering, for example, infrastructure solutions for volunteer management that hasn't been there till recent time. We have a lot of new providers in marketplaces, for example, that was mentioned today. We have the goals, we have closed communities of managers. We have chats in Telegram, WhatsApp, etc., where we are talking about how to manage CSOs, NGOs. We have the community of communication managers. We have the community of professional fundraisers where people are exchanging their experience and they are sharing how to better engage money or fundraise money, etc. All these infrastructure solutions, new providers, new technical solutions, new products, and new apps that are there in the field of organizational development of non-profitable organizations, in my opinion, that is a good indicator that experts are not mistaken. The index is growing, well, reducing, but growing because the capacities are growing. And organizational development as of today is sustainable and reliable, trying in the field that, yeah, it will not be reduced. So there is space for improvement, nevertheless. And in my personal opinion, this improvement in the field of governance for these organizations, because in Ukraine, the logics of creation of many organizations is distorted. I mean, in comparison with the world, because if people are disturbed by a problem, they want to resolve that, it hurts them, they want to help someone, they are united and they become members or they go to supervisory board or council of this organization. At the time when the employees, they are the usual workers who get salary for their job and they are working as the kind of employed people. Yeah, so it's widely spread way of creation. Such organizations in the world, in Ukraine, everything is upside down, and people who are in charitable foundations, very often they become employees. They go to the direction, they start getting money for the things that they do. What is causing this societal conflict, which is shown by our enemies? Because very often, like, what kind of activist you are if you're getting salary for your work? Still, I won't say how many years I've spent in the sector, but still, like, this discussion is held for dozens of years, and I think that the sector is mature enough to put a full stop in this discussion and say that, well, there is nothing bad when people who are hired, they are working in the sector, they get wages, but you need to have the developed membership. You need to have people who are members of organization included to the board, to the council, and those who will ensure this connection of the CSO with the society that they have to represent. And when we will have it this way and the sector will conduct this self-regulation, I'm confident there will be no situations when people say, like, okay, who you are? Especially authorities like to ask that, like, people voted for me, who voted for you? Not to have these questions. Finally, as sector, we have to conduct this self-regulation, and we have to set up the new standard for ourselves. And I believe that then next year, this index will grow even more. And I will say a bit dangerous trend that I see. I would like to mention that it's about that today, when we, well, of course, with the reasons we are proud of our civil society and organizational development of our civil society, people continue, and I am deeply confident that now is the moment when we have to teach and we have to show and tell many countries in Europe and in the world how the work should be done. And I am confident that there are not many countries in the world that would be able to cope as well as Ukraine when having full-scale war in the country, but still we see this trend. Come to Ukraine and teach us, make the capacity building for us, increase our capacity, etc., etc. And I think that we still need that, but yeah, it's like the warning for all of us. Let us be attentive. And we won't give the opportunity to use this narrative in order to delay the process of real localization that we are talking about so much. Because there is this danger. I see that, and I'd love us to acknowledge that. And we shouldn't allow using this narrative in the context, because we have a lot of local experience. We have local providers, we have local players, we have local infrastructure, big, developed, ready infrastructure, and we have everything in order to do the capacity building for ourselves, and even more sharing that externally. So let us keep that in mind. Let us follow the processes, and we won't let it happen in such a dangerous direction. And I encourage everyone who hears us, who sees us, to set a task for yourself to become the agents of experience exchange, like with the foreigners. Of course, it's not about being lazy, because the priorities are that we are all focused on internal challenges. And that's right, but we all have to have some time to set that as a work task, go abroad, tell about our experience, promote that. Tell that Ukrainian civil society is capable, strong, impactful, and we can teach many of you how to work, As for the priorities of support, there is always need in institutional development, and I think that we need to have even separate discussion here, more like in the donor environment, in donor community, that Ukrainian civil society is mature enough in order to get the maximum of institutional support in terms of projects. Because now mostly donors give the money for a project come to an end, and the organization is looking for the support again. But the growth of index says that there is readiness, there is capacity, there is the ability to administer money on it institutionally. However, of course, we need to use that flexibly, and we need to apply that and to know what is the extent of this institutional support that is suitable. And I think it's the subject for other discussion, not today, but the sector is ready for the other level of interaction with donors. We are ready to actually partnership and real localization. There is no doubt about that. Thank you very much. There was a very valuable thesis that the sector has so much experience, and which is unique for Europe and for the world. It may be the experience that we'd rather not have, but it happens so that we do have that we can already broadcast to the world and strengthen ourselves in this sense. Thank you so much. Okay, now do we have Mr. Alexander with us? Mr. Alexander, do you hear us? Hi. Yeah, I hear you perfectly well. Yeah, I think you should see me. Thank you for joining us. And we have a question. What communication practices in 2024 were most successful, and how they supported the change of perception of CSOs in society? Thank you very much for your question. Well, actually, first of all, I'm sorry I could not join you live. Yeah, there was certain force majeure, and in parallel, I asked to postpone that because I have the next meeting at 1 p.m. As for the practices, in the research, we did not check that, but we can clearly see that everything related to communication in terms of volunteers. So, first of all, public image is our direction. It's one of the directions that is taking the index down in terms of science, but it takes them up in terms of conditions. So traditionally, civil society in Ukraine has quite positive public image, both in terms of, in the eyes of population, and also, no matter how ironically that sounds, in the eyes of our authorities. But there are some details I'd like to talk about, because most positions, well, you can see that volunteer organizations, they have better reputation than civil society in general. Well, and of course, they are taking positive reputation of the powers of defense and security, because they are like helpers for the army, and the society is appreciating the army, and they value the army, and they have high trust to volunteer organizations as representatives of CSOs. However, here is a big problematic moment, because I would like to stick to methodology of the research, and I wouldn't like to talk about everything what happened from the beginning of 2025, because I understand that the events that are now relevant, well, that interferes with what was last year, but nevertheless, I'd like to pay attention to the problematic point that is there both in the research of 2024, that this positive reputation is achieved mostly by the work of several big charitable foundations. So Pritula's foundation, so to say, and I think like Sternenko's foundation we can mention. Yeah, it's also like charitable organization. So as a matter of fact, these are most recognized funds. They have the strongest reputation with the population, and as a matter of fact, in many things, the public image of the public sector is held on these institutions, and for civil society, that's high risk, because actually we are dependent on the reputation. We make the reputation of civil sector dependent on several organizations, and anything might happen to them. I don't want to make any bad prognosis, but if tomorrow Pritula's foundation will do something bad that people won't like, so actually that will dramatically lower the reputation and the public image of all the civil society. So actually it is very important to mention here that this research doesn't exist on its own, that we all just came, we assess that, and methodologically we make some nice things. It's a roadmap for the civil society, for some initiatives. They can take a look at the things that were there last year, the problems, and they can do something this year to fix it. So my recommendation is to build sustainable relationship with media, with the population, to raise the reputation of certain organizations so that our civil society can be less dependent on these several strong players. Thank you. I have a very brief speech. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite to the floor Ms. Olha Limar. Like 10 years from informal union to formal one. So it's like the complication of system of management, 10 years of systemic work, from work in the revolution of dignity till how we work right now with the Euro integration topic, recovery topic during the full-scale invasion. And that is really good sign for us of sustainable, impactful work. And actually for coalition, it is quite unusual, and we are so proud of that as Ukraine. In terms of advocacy at the beginning, we have mentioned a lot of different trends, and I will not repeat all of those because both Valeria and Maxim has mentioned the draft law and also the draft law on local governance, etc., because it's only forming a certain legislative framework, how CSOs or active citizens can do it, but also in a way it's a result of advocacy successes. And one more time, I'd like to stop on that. I think that every year I repeat that the law on public consultations, the problems with that is not just that it comes into force after the end of the martial law and we can't even imagine when that will happen, but there are also other problems that people's deputies, they are not the mandatory subjects of conducting the public consultations. And just to mention, if the situation that happened last week with these crazy tempos of adoption of law that makes it impossible for the anti-corruption bodies to be independent, even though there are many other questions to that regarding the rights of people. This law will make the situation impossible. So last year and now we continue working so that no matter when it comes into force, it has to include people's deputies. And we are changing the focus to who is actually the subject of forming state policies, because actually those have to be the ministries. That is a recommendation of Sigma, and this law is shifting the focus, and it gives some availability for manipulations. I would also like to stop on some other fields. For example, let us recall the draft law on administrative fees. We as a coalition, together with Center for Reforms, we've been working a lot, both like publicly and not. That is the issue of capacity of Centers for Administrative Services. It's the issue of combating corruption and honesty and justice in society. And now in 2025, we can say that it is adopted in the first reading. Well, and in general, it's a very good story. Then there were also some positive moments, but this year they have stopped, and partially it has certain reasons. In other directions, like judicial reforms, well, it's also adopted in the first reading. So when we are talking about advocacy, we should not forget, especially in terms of reforms, we are moving in Euro integration track, and last year it was mostly dedicated to routine work. Like about the 3 roadmaps, fundamental cluster that the government has adopted this year already. We know that unfortunately the first cluster that had to be opened officially this year and these roadmaps, it was not open. So from one side there were some issues with the EU and the Hungary that was blocking that. Now there are issues from our side and certain reverse movement in terms of reforms. Then Ukraine facility, and last year we've been working a lot on some issues that we would have to report on this year already. If we are talking about these points, then for example, situation with the draft law 4298 on state administrations and creation of the prefect type institutions, well, we've been working a lot with the parliament, and we were working on consolidated and the good version of this draft law, like the best version of it. At the end, it was not adopted this year, but we already see the results, certain punishments, financial punishments for our state. So I think that now we will have to take all of that into account much more seriously. Well, in general, I think that there was a lot of routine work in a sense. However, it is hard to avoid the temptation to compare 2024 in terms of 2025, and if we recall the law already, the law on lobbyism, I will not say about its core right now. It has become better, but still not that good. But the approach to advocacy and how we've been working last year, when we finally could sit at the same table with the Office of Vice Prime Minister on European Euro-Atlantic integration and participate in the work of the committee and the parliament, and we could reach certain compromise. I won't say consensus, but compromise. And now in 2025, we are coming to working outside, on the streets. So not even the norms, but some draft laws. And it's not the tendency that I like. And actually, I hope that, again, we will have the opportunity to come back to our work routine, because that's the only option, actually, how we can work during the martial law if we are talking about integration of the state. So it's more a call to the parliament and government and the president. We need to have the cold head, but we already see certain things we have to work on. And there are positive changes from the other side. Thank you very much. Hopefully our calls will be heard and the work will be as efficient as possible. And Ms. Helena, please. 2024, how or why it was special, and maybe it gave some opportunities to consider some things, and in particular in terms of services. Helena Skipalska, Executive Director, Health Right International. I would like to greet our partners, including the UCIPR team, that this report was published. We can use that. There is wonderful tool, dashboard, and I encourage other CSOs to use that as well. The Ukrainian Foundation for Public Health is functioning in Ukraine in between the fields of health protection and provision of social services. And in 2024, more than 500,000 of women and children, and also men, received holistic psychosocial services. That is why, I can say, and I want share my observations regarding this information that was presented. First of all, 2024, the level of service provision by CSOs remains without changes. And I would say that from one side, it talks about the stable, but, not breaking dynamics, because every year when we are presenting the index, we expect that still in Ukraine there will be a certain breakthrough in development of the market of service, social service provision, and for civil society. At the same time, the main focus of 2024 was on provision of social services to people in difficulty, and families in difficulty, and to those who suffered from war, because huge number of population in 2024 they required services. In 2025, 2026, these tendencies will just grow, unfortunately. What is the positive fact? That as of March 2025, in state registry of providers of social services, we have more grantors. 525 in 2023 we had, and we see significant growth. As for financial issues, it is interesting to see and to hear that only some percentages of organizations say that provision of services is their priority, and only 3% have the source of financing from out of that. So civil society organizations, they are providing social services because that is their mission, because we want to help those who need our support and our help, and not because that's the European approaches, market, and then in several years we will be able to speak about the quality of these services. As of now, it's because of the mission of organizations that are involved in provision of social services. Thus, organizations of civil society organizations very often they said that they cannot fully meet the needs of target groups because of lack of resources, and this tendency continues. And I think that 2025 will show us that even more, with the suspension of some humanitarian projects that were financed by the U.S. government and also USAID. However, many organizations have participated in tenders, they won the contracts, they even performed some logistic tasks for international organizations. But again, it's about the mission. It's not about the market. It's not even about the partnership with certain organizations. I mean, big international organizations and UN structures that were looking for service providers. And of course, as for the positive example of the state-private interaction, I would like to underline that one more time. Those are resilient sectors. This is really cool innovation when CSOs together with the communities, including 2025, it was support and partnership of businesses, because those were open at state resilience center. And at the end of 2024, such centers, resilient centers, we had 85 of those, and 2025, I think more than 250. And what is important, that still 84% are CSOs. Yes, we have municipal institutions here, and of course, we have private entrepreneurs that were applied and created resilient centers, but 84% are CSOs. This fact is very cool and important. And 2025, well, I will just jump over a bit, but there was even more interesting pilot project launched with the Embassy of Great Britain, with Isari Yednanya, and also UNICEF, where the communities could apply together with the CSOs, together with the private entrepreneurs, municipal enterprises, and they could get money from the national budget in order to develop certain services that are lacking in the communities. Thus, we are coming even closer to development of the market of social services in Ukraine. As for the paid services, they are developing slowly, and the main barriers still are the fear of losing non-profitable status, the difficulties with taxes, with taxation, and the legislation which is not developed properly in the field of social service provision. And of course, the moment that not all the donors, not all the partners are ready and understand that it has to be done, because due to provision of certain paid services, organizations of civil society that are working for the mission of support the most, like some vulnerable categories, or the categories that they consider need support, they can accumulate money and then use the money to reach their mission. So these are the key recommendations or conclusions that were mentioned in the report. It's like expansion of financing, in particular state financing, development of market of social services, and when we are talking about expansion of financing, like state financing, we are talking about national financing, even though we do understand that social services can and should be financed from local budgets, and in big cities it also should be the priority where there are budgets. If you look at relocated communities and south and east, of course they need special support from local budget because they don't have enough local money to finance these services. We need the tax reform that will allow to combine service provision with non-profitable status, and it's very important to invest the development of financial management of CSOs places. And I'd like to add a question from my side because we are talking about state financing. We are researching that. However, in order to provide social services, it is very important also to work with donors and with big international organizations that are financing service provision by humanitarian organizations nowadays. So it's also very important to advocate. It is more like the call to CSOs, the issue of overheads, etc. You have to turn that on. You have to demand that from donors and other UN agencies. Organizations should have some small percentage for administering for indirect expenses, or in other words, the overheads that will allow them later on to be more powerful, stronger, to hire better experts, additional staff, and strengthen the capacity of their staff. Well, and of course, I will finalize that on a very important recommendation because people are talking about that. That is a combination of humanitarian reacting and the resources that are used for humanitarian reacting and the east of our country and south with the plans, strategic plans of development and recovery, because all of that in the conditions of war that continues very clearly these are very closely connected activities. And I would like to thank all the CSOs that in spite of difficult times and challenges are functioning. They are financed, they find money, and they help the most vulnerable categories of Ukrainians. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you very much for highlighting the trends for 2025 that will help organizations improve their own policies and provision of social services. And questions? Yeah. Do you have any questions to our speakers, the audience? Yeah, maybe we have online some questions. Yeah, maybe questions to the speakers who were with us online. Maybe. Can I ask the question? Sure. Hi. Please present yourself. Serhiy Chumak, head of Poltava Regional Union, the Union of People with Disability of Ukraine, first deputy of the head of our organization. I represent our organization as one of the most widely spread ones in Ukraine. And I'd like to ask a question. We are really interested in the status, the charter of organizations of territorial communities. How is that formed nowadays, and whether interests of persons with disability are taken into account? I will explain why we are worried about that, because very often we are not included there, and it's like, well, okay, our interests are not included. So again, it's like the self-governance organizations of people. So for example, like as a person of a disability in different unions, my interests don't always coincide with the general interest of other people, of people who are included into the self-governance of the building, for example, of the residential building. And we'd like to have just special provisions. It would be really good if you could conduct for us some workshop, webinar, seminar, in order to tell us, what is in there. Because for ourselves in our information channel, the power of spirit, we are trying to provide information services, and for example, now the 12:10, you have some good moment about humanitarian aid, and now we have really acute need of ensuring people with disability, especially people in wheelchairs, they cannot actually move otherwise than only with the help of the vehicle. And for the parking lots for them, they have to be only for them and only for those people who need it, and they cannot do without it. As of now, in legislative terms, like both those who brought the people, they can stand on that place, and those that have signs of disabled persons, well, we have a different, but I want you to know about that and the use of law and humanitarian aid, just to be able to use that, and the people who really need it, well, just to kind of eliminate the norm about 1,800 cubes, and then a person cannot buy the vehicle that is stronger. But you do understand that if the person comes on a wheelchair and it's like Fiat or any other car, then they have more than 1,800 horsepowers. So we would like your organizations to conduct for us some educational work, or maybe you can take that as a separate project, because the needs are there. Thank you very much for your offer. Please give us your contacts, and yeah, we will contact you for sure. But I also see the hand raised from Maxim. Let's say, please, Maxim, technically, if that is possible, comment on that. I can do that technically and really. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good question. Thank you, Mr. Sedehi. As for the Charter of Territorial Community, fully agree with you, because the Charter of the Community is a key document that determines the procedures according to which local self-government is interacting with the citizens of territorial community. That is, well, all the procedures are in there, how the city head is interacting, and it has structural units of city council and deputies, etc., etc. All these procedures have to take into account the interests of persons with disability, the interests of veterans and youth and other groups. And yeah, I totally agree that these charters have to take into account the interests of, well, they should give inclusive procedures that is available for everyone. As of now, together with the support of International Renaissance Foundation, we are preparing the project, like we are preparing the model or the template charter of territorial community for local self-governments. And Alexei is actively participating in that, and we are so grateful in working group of the Ministry of Region. It will be that foundation. We are working in order to use the inclusivity procedures there to highlight an information on the website, possibilities of access to some public hearings or to have some meetings, or for the person to be able to join online and write the question, for example, etc., etc. That is very important, and I think that preliminarily for October, we have it provided that we will have some presentation and methodological recommendations we will recommend to all of them that, yeah, it's important. But the workshop is also important. Yeah, advice and consultations for the Union of People with Disability. Because as of now, we have 1,250 of territorial communities that are under the control of Ukraine nowadays, and most of them has to have these charters created, and most of them have started working on these charters. So we are ready to conduct the workshop for your organization, I think. And here, well, we need more such consultations and seminars, and hopefully donors will support the initiative. And well, we submitted the project to support the territorial communities in terms of implementation of the charters and teaching local organizations in order to increase the capacity and defend the rights of people with disability. In particular, so that the procedures are there for the people, in the interest of people, and they are available for people, not just for servants of city council, some procedures that nobody understands and it's impossible just to perform that. So we hope that donors will scale such workshops for you, and we are ready to conduct that as volunteers with the resources that we've got. But of course, we have bigger needs in Ukraine. So all the donors who hear that, we are ready as an organization to work and to help different social groups in order to strengthen their capacity and also to help them defend their interests in terms of interaction and proper governance, etc., etc. As for the 2010 draft law. This draft law primarily is aimed at the possibility to local charitable foundations gain the cards in order to perform their charter tasks. It's organizational development of the organization on humanitarian reacting. So unfortunately, in the first reading, there are no norms that are about the natural persons, like person with disability, to get the vehicle for their needs. But theoretically, these people can get support from their organizations, at least that will help such vehicles, and they will provide the transportation of people with disability, etc., etc. So there are no limitations in the mode of first reading, and the committee has approved the table for the second reading. No limitations. Yeah, in terms of power of the vehicle, it might be the small bus and the bus and the vehicle that is specially equipped for the wheelchair, so that people can use that. Well, at least this service of transporting people on the wheelchairs, well, it can be developed. The transport of organizations of persons with disabilities, so maybe for some minimal donations, etc., they can provide such services. So one more time, this draft law that will allow to develop the social services on the level of different NGOs. Later on, we can think jointly on advocacy campaign and improving conditions for people with disability for personal use. That's my answer. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Maxim. Thank you. And your request was so relevant that we have even comment from Ms. Orhan. Thank you very much. I'd like to mention that the topic of rights of people with disability as a topic of human rights, it is part of the roadmaps in the framework of our Euro integration space that I mentioned. And in general, the people. Moreover, human rights activists that I know that are working with the topic, rights of people with disability, they say what is useful for people with disability is useful for everyone. And we received a lot of things like audiobooks. I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. That allows me to read or to, just to consume bigger number of books. And as for the charter, of course, each organization might be flexible here in this regard, but I would like to advise you to work with the organizations that are systemically working for many years with the topic of rights of people with disability, especially the coalition of PR. They have Fight for Right coalition created and functioning according to the UN Convention on Human Rights, and they have a lot of different offers how to improve life on the level of community. Moreover, I think we should pay attention when we are talking about charters. We are not just talking about infrastructure, because usually, most often we think about that, but there is a big topic of deinstitutionalization, and when people live, well, not because of their will, but they live in certain institutions, not in the community. And that also has to be one of the elements of these charters. So I think that there is sense to join the communities of people with disability at such organizations. They're working systemically on advocacy of rights of people with disability, and just pay attention to the organization that I mentioned. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Orhan. Do we have any other questions? I don't see. Probably not. Then, okay, thank you very much sincerely to everyone who joined us online and offline. And presentation of index is the event that is more than just annual assessment. It's a possibility to see yourself in a point, to see the dynamics, and just to provide for some plans for current and future years. Thank you so much for your being active, for your engagement. Thank you to speakers separately. And yeah, please contact us. We are open. Please use our updated dashboard. I would also like to remind you that our organization is conducting free of charge consultations for CSOs. We have the hotline. And when you call there, you can get the consultation on legal issues. And thank you all. See you.